Hi everyone, and welcome back to Spectra's podcast. Today you're joining me, Eli, he, him, and
Vix. My pronouns are he and they.
To discuss mental health from a trans perspective. In this podcast, me and Vix do describe details of our own personal experiences of mental health and discussions around barriers to mental health. So please be aware that some content in this podcast might be considered distressing. This podcast will be in 2 parts, so I do hope you stick around for both. But otherwise, Vix, thank you so much for joining me. Do you have any experience with mental health that you'd feel comfortable sharing with us?
I do. I am just finishing my mental health first aid certificates. I'm just waiting for the assessment. I've worked with people with mental health issues, not in any particular heavy way, but just as a first point of call to point people in the right direction. And obviously we all have mental health ourselves. So I work to help myself first so that I can help others.
That's a really good thing, because I think we forget that we got to look after ourselves if we want to help others at the end of the day.
Yeah, you need to have your own oxygen mask on first, because if you don't, the amount of help you can give to somebody will be severely limited.
I like that analogy, I really do. Amazing. So what does the term mental health mean to you?
Mental health to me is like physical health, and I work in both areas now. I started off working physical, but the two work together. They're not separate entities. One will affect the other, and so looking after both, it's a very delicate seesaw to get balanced, but it can be done as long as we know that, one, today is today, tomorrow is a new day, and it's always a fresh opportunity. But also, nothing particularly lasts forever. There's a quote from Tony Robbins that, for anybody who doesn't know Tony Robbins, he is classed as king of the self-help because he's been doing that longer than I've been alive. He has always said that winter never lasts forever, and at some point, spring will come, and the opportunities that come with it are the ones that we are working towards in the winter. Regardless of how bad it might be, we will always push through to spring. That's really lovely. And I think it kind of speaks to that kind of, you got to remember that progress is never linear, and, you know, you can have ups and downs. Yeah, if like the British weather, we could have 4 seasons in one day. It's unexpected for us to have all sorts of moods in one day. They don't last forever. Cool. So do you think there is a stigma around mental health? I do, and I think we need to work towards changing it, because the issues with physical disability in this country are still way behind where they could be and should be, and mental health is catching up. So it's not even where physical disabilities, it is still viewed as something to be scorned or to be suspicious of, and people with varied mental health conditions deserve the same attention and care as somebody who is learning to deal with a disability or has a disability. We need to look at how we can change as a society so that we work to get the best out of people, rather than automatically assume that because of X, Y, or Z, there is no purpose. What we need to start looking at is changing that picture to say, okay, yep, I'm having a bad mental health day. What should I be doing? There are many people who we could be looking to help and elevate, but are we looking for the solutions? Do you think the fact that you can sometimes see physical health versus not being able to see mental health plays into it at all? It can do, and it's only recently we've started acknowledging that not all physical disabilities are visible. So to me, it's like the iceberg. You've got the tent above the water. We don't always see what is going on with somebody. People are very good at doing what I call the British social. Yeah. How am I? Oh, I'm okay, thanks. And they've always said, ask twice.
Mm.
Don't just ask once. If you really care about somebody, ask twice.
It is important to share with people. And I mean, I remember when I was dealing with my worst mental health, prior to coming out as trans, and if people asked me if I was okay, I would break down into tears because I didn't even know where to start answering that kind of question.
Yes, some problems get built up so that by the time we verbalise it, it's this big bad thing in our minds. And verbalising it makes us realise it's actually not that bad. But then there are some things that we verbalise and it's somebody might say, okay, yeah,
Mm.
that's an issue, and let's find a way for you to deal with this.
What aspects of life do you think impact and affect mental health?
Everything. It'll affect personal life, it'll affect you as a day to day individual because let's take a little problem and follow it. So you've got this little problem and in the back of your mind you're worried about it. So it might start affecting what you're thinking about. So it might affect how you go about your day to day. You might go shopping and forget to buy things, or you might go to work and be distracted because this problem is sitting at the back of your mind and you are working your way processing it. So you may leave work and still be distracted, and you might physically bump into people because you're not paying attention to where you're going. And you might forget to eat because you're not realising what time it is. And so you miss a meal. So then you might go home and if you've got a partner, you might snap at your partner because they'll ask you a question and you either don't know how to answer it or don't want to answer it. So you might snap at your partner. Your partner then wonders what's wrong. You might have an argument. This potential chain can go on just because we don't talk about the problem that we're thinking about. And as I say, it's either a small problem that we can easily deal with ourselves. It's a problem where somebody may need to help you solve it, but there is no benefit in keeping that problem to yourself and hoping it will go away. Because if it is something that is bothering you, it won't.
Mm. And do those thoughts always like to creep up at any point to the point where it is like, oh, you forgot to buy something from the shop, but it genuinely feels like the end of the world, so you're going to have a massive breakdown.
Yeah.
But it's not about forgetting that one thing from the shop. Everything else going on in your life. But that was, the straw that broke the camel's back, right?
Yeah. And so it might seem that the person having a breakdown in Tesco is literally crying over spilt milk.
Yeah.
But to me, I want to know what's led to that point. The meltdown will bring everything forwards. So the person concerned, it's the emotional release, but it's not always that there's relief coming from it. And so in that respect, like I say, I'd always want to know, yes, you're crying about the milk at the moment, but what's the lead up? And many people will say, if you ask them, you'll be like, well, what's the real issue? And they'll be like, I don't know. They do. They're just frightened to verbalise.
Mm.
And that's okay because I think it's better for people to talk when they feel ready rather than feel forced. But there are times where, in order to solve that problem, you do have to push a little bit harder to help. And that's the only difficult thing is how hard do you to get somebody to talk about a problem if they've projected it for so long that they're frightened that the world will end if they share that. You can give everybody the information, but it won't stop people doing silly things because people are people. They will do what they want when they're ready to in their own sweet time. If somebody wants to look at suicide, then I would always say, please talk to someone, because at the end of the day, share the problem. It might be something that we can do something about. Usually is.
Yeah.
Because we build these thoughts up into our minds that we're insignificant, we don't matter, and people won't mind if we're not about. There is always somebody somewhere that will notice, and they will miss you.
Yeah.
They will hate the fact that you didn't talk to them. We can try. We can try our very best. But I would like to hope that if somebody felt like that, felt they could talk to me, with this world in the last 5 years, we are still struggling to deal with the effects of COVID, the decisions that were made to protect us. And there's still people who are nervous about going out, socialising, and that's okay. But let's talk about these things because they matter. If I want to talk to somebody via Zoom instead of having a coffee, that's okay. A new way of doing things shouldn't necessarily be seen as a bad way.
Yeah. And I think of all the things that happened during COVID, it did teach us that we can be with people without physically being with people.
Yeah.
And I feel like, as a society, we're all ready to just get back into normal life and pretend it didn't happen. But we can't. That's unrealistic. And there are good things that we can take away from COVID with, work from home culture becoming more popular. But there's also really bad things that if we ignore, they are going to get to us. I personally have severe anxiety. So when we were told to stay in the house, my anxiety loved it. I kind of, it gave my mental health a massive excuse to do its most destructive thing, which is isolate myself. So when we were told to come out of that isolation, my anxiety went crazy because, I had years where I was actually indulging my worst habit because there was no other option. But then coming out of that, I, could barely leave my house.
Yeah. And that makes things challenging because we're expected to just go back to normal. But even with most people, even now, are saying that their trans egg was broken around COVID. And if it wasn't necessarily at that time, it's that period of isolation that's given them the train of thoughts that, hey, I might not be who I thought I was, and I need to explore this. And that's a big thing too, because as well as being in isolation, depression and anxiety, it wasn't the ideal situation. But having depression and anxiety, and then also kind of having to consider LGBTQ, that then adds extra things on. And this is the aftermath. And I don't mean that in a negative sense. If it's helped people to realise and acknowledge who they are, that's probably saved many people a long period of questioning and self-doubt because they're working through that now. And that in itself can only then help improve people's mental health. Because if you don't know who you are or who you might be, there's a lot of doubt, fear, anxiety about that. Because you start thinking, well, I don't think I'm this. But what am I? I know I'm different. I think we develop a mental strength in one way. That's not to say depression and anxiety still can't factor into other areas in our lives. But when we've got more of a security in knowing who we are, then you become more confident. Because if we look at all of this, the one common theme here is talking. The fact British don't do it.
No, we're all polite smiles and small talk, aren't we? We don't like to, at the end of the day, I don't know, be uncomfortable, I guess. Or I don't know what it is. and why it is, but I think there is something about British culture that is just too polite to actually care more than a surface level.
Yeah. Because there's that fear of what might I be dragged into. And the answer is nothing. You don't have to be dragged into something. You can say, I don't know enough about this, but let's have a look online. Can we find somebody who does know about it?
Yeah, 100%.
Things like, do I need a counsellor? Do I need a therapist? Do I need it in a specific area?
Mm.
So, for example, if it's work, you wouldn't necessarily need a therapist. You might need a mentor. Whereas when it's a relationship or a friendship, we might choose a counsellor.
Mm.
In the traditional British way, we need to learn to talk.
Mm.
I will say to people, I may not be able to help you with the root cause, but let's talk the problem through and see if I can help. But if not, where should we look? Where would you be happy looking for somebody to support you?
Yeah, 100%.
Sometimes it's just having that person beside you say it's okay.
Yeah. Sometimes you just need a handhold, and that's really okay. So looking at you as a person, is there anything you do kind of day to day to support your own mental health?
I used to be a really bad worrier back in my early 20s. I won't say a high pressure job, it was, but it's not one of those. But it was a job where everything had to be done to specific policy, and there was a lot of pressure. And I used to worry about it all the time. When I left work at the end of the day, I was never allowed any free time to just relax and be stressed. And in the end, I burned out.
Mm.
You know, I'll be honest about that. I burned out and I needed that break. But somebody who used to work at a different site, same company, said two ways you can look at it. What am I worried about? First of all, that's the first question you ask. Second question is, can I do something about it now? So even if this question pops up at 3 a.m, can I do something about it now? If you can, do it. Because if it will help you go back to sleep and get a better night's rest, even if it's sending an email or preparing an email or a text to send or sociable hour, shall we say, do it. Because if that will help ease your mind so that you can then go back to sleep, worry a little less, then that's what needs to be done. But if you're waiting for somebody else to do something, you can draft up an email to remind them or a text message, but until they do it, you then have to wait. So the problem then is you've done your bit. You have to wait for somebody else, but you've done what you can. So you can't worry about what or when somebody else is going to, because it won't make them do it any quicker. Whilst it has taken me a while to learn it, that is always my first question. So, can I do something about it now? But it's just that thing of, I can do something about it now. It's 2:30 in the morning. But yeah, I'm going to draft that email because I know I won't go back to sleep. If it's a problem big enough, you probably either won't rest or you'll toss and turn and you won't get the quality sleep. So you might as well get up and do it. And hopefully by that point, you feel a little bit easier to be able to sort out other issues.
Thank you so much again, Vix, for sharing your experiences. And you've made so many points that have really resonated with me. So I hope they resonate with others. We will continue this conversation in part 2. So stick around for that. But otherwise, please look after yourself if you found any of this content distressing and reach out for help if need be.